The hall of the alien palace was silent at first, but then a scream of pain broke the silence. The alien queen stood in the center, her gown torn, her side bleeding, her golden crown tilted, as if even the crown itself no longer wished to stay. On her head, her eyes burned with rage, her voice like thunder as she snarled. "You are not worthy to touch me, human." The human soldier stood a few steps away. His armor cracked, blood dripping from his arms, his weapon in his hand shaking not because of fear, but because of exhaustion. He had fought to reach her, fought against shadows in the palace, against alien warriors who once served her, but now seemed to serve someone else. And after all of that, the queen, the one he thought he was protecting, was now looking at him as if he was the betrayer. The chamber around them was destroyed. Broken pillars lay across the floor. Alien fire burned on the walls, blue and green flames dancing in the dark. The smell of blood and smoke mixed together. The queen staggered, but did not fall. Her pride would not let her. She pressed a hand against her wound, crimson blood staining her fingers, but her eyes never left the human. He wanted to shout, to tell her the truth, to beg her to believe him, but he only whispered, his voice low, "I didn't betray you." The queen's sharp laugh echoed in the ruined hall, sharp and bitter. She looked at him as if his words were dust. "You came into my palace," she hissed, "and my guards are dead. My throne is broken. My blood is on the floor, and you say you are innocent?" The human's jaw clenched. He remembered every step that had brought him here. He remembered fighting through the corridors, where alien nobles had screamed and fled. He remembered the way the shadows struck from every side, blades sliding out. Of the dark, he remembered the dying guard who had whispered a warning, telling him the queen was the target, not him, and still. She believed he was the hand of betrayal. The hall shook as another explosion echoed from outside. The palace was under attack, not from him, not from humans, but from her own kind. The human knew it, he could feel it, yet she stared at him with nothing but rage. He lowered his weapon, letting it fall with a clang onto the cracked stone. "I bled to reach you," he said, voice firm but quiet. "I fought against your enemies, not against you." Her eyes narrowed, doubt flickering but hidden under layers of pride and pain. The queen raised her blade, its edge glowing with alien fire, and pointed it at his chest. Her words caught like the blade itself. "If you touch me again, if you even breathe near me, I will end you here." The human did not move. He only stood, bleeding, breathing, waiting. But then the sound came, the sound of more footsteps, armored, heavy, echoing. Through the broken doorway, figures entered the hall, tall alien warriors with weapons drawn. Their armor marked not with the queen's symbol, but with the sign of rebellion. The queen turned in shock, her eyes widening. For one brief second, she forgot the human. She realized that the blades that had struck her were not his, but theirs. Yet pride is a strong chain. Her lips did not form an apology. She still looked at him as if he was a part of this betrayal. The human, however, moved. He did not care about her rage. He did not care about her words. What he cared about was survival. What he cared about was protecting her, even if she hated him. With a roar, he picked up his weapon again, the weight almost too heavy for his tired arms. And he stood in front of her as the rebel soldiers advanced. The queen gasped softly, not out of fear, but out of surprise. She had ordered him away, called him unworthy, even raised her blade to his chest. And yet here he was, standing like a wall of flesh and blood before her throne. Her pride cracked for just one heartbeat. Her heart whispered what her lips would not. Could it be true? Could he truly be loyal? A clash came fast. Blades struck, sparks flew. The human fought like a man who had nothing left but his oath. Every strike he took, every wound that opened on his skin, was proof of his stand. The queen watched in silence, her chest rising and falling, Her blood dripping on the floor, she whispered to herself words no one could hear. If he is not the betrayer, then who is? The hall filled with chaos, the air filled with screams, and between fire and blood, between loyalty and doubt, the queen and the human stood together, though not yet united. The truth of betrayal was still hidden in the shadows. And the story was only beginning. The battle in the throne room was only the beginning. By the time the human's blade struck down the last rebel soldier, his body was trembling, his breath ragged, his blood mixing with theirs on the floor. The queen stood behind him, still holding her glowing blade, but she had not struck once. She only watched, her eyes stormy, her pride like armor hiding her confusion. The silence that followed was heavy. The human leaned against a broken pillar, his weapon dragging along the ground. The queen's wound still bled, dark red dripping slowly down her arm. But she did not allow herself to collapse. She straightened, pulling the crown back upon her head, even as blood streaked her lips. "You fought them," she whispered, as if the truth hurt to speak. "You protected me when you had no reason to." Her voice cracked for the smallest moment, but then hardened again. "But the question remains, human. Why were you here when the blades turned against me? Why do you stand in the heart of my palace as if you belong?" The human looked up, his eyes tired but burning. "I was sent to warn you," he said, voice quiet. "But I came too late." Her head tilted, suspicion sharp in her gaze. "Warn me? Or deceive me? My council told me your kind wanted influence in my throne room. They told me you wished to chain my rule with whispers and promises." The human's jaw tightened. He remembered the whispers, the stares, the way alien nobles looked at him like filth. From the first day the queen had allowed a human soldier into her guard. The court had hated it. They had smiled with poisoned lips, speaking of tradition, of honor, of purity. But their eyes carried nothing but envy and fear. They did not want her to trust him. They did not want her to need him. He closed his eyes, remembering the beginning, the war that had first brought them together. It was 2 years ago when the Queen's empire faced annihilation from an enemy that burned entire worlds. Humans, still new to the galactic stage, offered soldiers to stand beside her armies. Most aliens laughed at the idea of human help, but the Queen, desperate and wise, accepted. And among those soldiers was him, a nameless human warrior who would fight through fire and death by her side. They had bled together in that war. They had stood on battlefields where the air itself turned toxic. They had shared victory and loss, and though she never admitted it, the Queen came to trust him. A fragile trust, built not with words, but with the silence of warriors who survive when others fall. Yet that trust was fragile. Like glass, it could be shattered by a single lie, and the court was filled with lies. Alien generals whispered that the human wanted her throne. Priests claimed humans were cursed, dangerous, not fit to touch royalty. And slowly, the Queen began to doubt. She told herself it was only a soldier's loyalty, not friendship, not trust. But when the blade struck her in her own chamber, and when the human was the first face she saw through the smoke, her heart leapt to the easiest answer. It was him. It had to be him, now. As she stood with him in the wreckage, her mind battled itself. She wanted to hate him, to cast him out, to declare him guilty, but her eyes betrayed her pride. They had seen the way he fought, the way he placed his own broken body between her and the rebel blades. If betrayal lived in his heart, why would he bleed for her? She said nothing, turning her face away. The human, however, spoke again. "Your generals," he whispered. "They plotted this. I heard their voices in the shadows. They fear you. They fear what you are becoming, a ruler who trusts a human." The Queen froze, her heart pounding. Could it be true? Could her own blood betray her? Throne, she wanted to deny it, but the memory of those blades cutting into her flesh returned. Her guards had turned on her faster than lightning, and their eyes, when they struck, had been filled with certainty that she would fall. Sound of footsteps echoed in the corridor outside. The queen's eyes narrowed, her blade lifting again. The human stepped in front of her once more without hesitation. Even wounded, even mistrusted, he placed himself as her shield. Her chest ached, not from the wound, but from something deeper. Why did he fight for her still, when she had given him nothing but doubt and scorn? The doors burst open. But this time it was not rebels. It was her loyal handmaiden, trembling, eyes wide with terror. "My queen," she cried. "The council gathers. They speak of your death. They say you have fallen. They say the human has taken your place." The queen's grip on her blade trembled. Her court, her own blood, her nobles already preparing her funeral while she still lived. The human looked at her, his voice steady. Despite the pain in his chest, they have already chosen their story. If you want the truth to live, then we must fight together. They have already chosen their story. If you want the truth to live, then we must fight together. The queen looked at him for a long moment. Her pride told her to push him away. Her rage told her to kill him where he stood. But the part of her that remembered the war, the battlefields, the shared blood, whispered another answer. Perhaps the true betrayal was not standing before her. Perhaps it waited in the shadows of her own throne. The hall shook again as explosions thundered closer. The queen's eyes blazed, her wound dripping fresh blood down her gown. She raised her blade and said, "Very well, human, for now. You live, but if you lie to me, if this is your trick, I will not hesitate to cut you down myself." The human nodded, no fear in his gaze, and as the fires of rebellion burned through the palace, the fragile alliance between queen and human was reborn, an alliance cracked, broken, but not yet destroyed. And in the darkness outside, the real traitor smiled, knowing the war inside the palace had only just begun. The palace walls shook again, dust falling from the ceiling as the echo of another blast rolled through the corridors. The queen pressed her hand harder against her wound, her eyes sharp as knives, her pride refusing to show weakness. The human stood a few feet away, his armor cracked, his breathing heavy, but his weapons still ready in his hands. They did not speak, because there was no time left for words. The sound of boots thundered down the corridor. Shadows stretched long across the broken stone. The rebels were coming, and this time it was not a handful of soldiers. It was an army. The queen's jaw tightened, her mind racing. She had fought on many battlefields, but never had she felt the sting of betrayal so close. Her own people turning blades against her, while the one she accused of treachery stood ready to bleed for her again. The human did not look back at her. He only planted his feet firmly in the ruined doorway. He raised his blade, his hands trembling from exhaustion, but his stance unbroken. Every breath burned his lungs. Every muscle screamed to rest, but he ignored it all. For him, only one thing mattered. She must not fall, not while he still lived. The queen's voice, sharp and commanding, cut through the silence. "You should run, human. You have no reason to die here. This is not your war." The human did not turn, did not even flinch. His voice came back steady. "It became my war the day I swore to protect you." The queen's chest tightened, a strange ache twisting inside her. She had heard soldiers swear loyalty 1,000 times, but those words often melted when the fire of battle grew too hot. Yet here was a human, bloodied and broken, standing firm in a palace that was not his, against enemies that were not his. Why, she thought, why does he still stand? The doors at the far end burst open. Rebel soldiers poured into the hall, their eyes wild with hatred, their blades glowing with alien fire. They roared as they charged. The human roared back, his voice echoing like thunder in the chamber. And then the clash began. Steel struck steel, sparks flew. The human's blade met the first rebel's strike and turned it aside. Even as a second cut into his shoulder, he spun, slamming his weapon through another soldier's chest, blood spraying across the broken floor. The queen could only watch at first, her hand tight on her blade, her pride warring with her disbelief. Every time she thought he would fall, he rose again. Every time she thought the rebels would crush him, he pushed them back. But the rebels were many, too many. Their numbers pressed him back step by step, his armor split under their blades, crimson soaking through. Still he fought, his eyes blazing with a fire that no wound could dim. At last, the queen could no longer stand in silence. Her pride cracked, and her blade lifted. With a cry that shook the hall, she leapt into the fight, her glowing sword cleaving through rebel flesh. The rebels faltered, shocked to see their queen still alive. And in that moment of hesitation, the human struck down two more, blood dripping from every inch of him. Back to back, they stood, her movements elegant, deadly, each strike fueled by rage and betrayal, his movements brutal, raw, each strike fueled by pain and loyalty. Together they carved through the tide of enemies. For the first time since the betrayal began, their blades sang the same song. But even as they fought, the rebels kept coming. It was as if the shadows themselves poured soldiers into the hall. The queen's strength began to fade, her wound stealing her breath. The human noticed. Even as he blocked another strike, she staggered, her sword lowering for just a heartbeat. And in that instant a rebel lunged toward her, blade raised high, without thought, without hesitation. The human moved. He threw himself between them. The rebel's blade pierced into his side, blood spraying across the cracked floor. The queen gasped, her heart clenching. The human gritted his teeth, turned his head, and whispered through the pain, "I told you. I didn't betray you, but I'll bleed for you." Then, with a roar that shook even the rebels, he tore the blade free and cut the enemy down. The queen's hands trembled, her eyes wide as she stared at him. For the first time, her doubt faltered. If he were a traitor, he would have let her fall. If he were false, he would never have stood between her and death. Her pride screamed to deny it, but her heart whispered the truth. Still, the rebels pressed on. Her fury reignited, and she cut through them like fire, through dry grass. Her sword became a blur, her rage turning into strength. The human fought beside her, even as blood poured from his side, his body failing, his vision blurring, but his will unbroken. At last, the hall grew quiet again. Bodies littered the ground, the scent of blood thick in the air. The queen stood panting, her blade dripping. The human knelt, one hand pressed against his wound, his face pale, but his eyes still burning. For a long moment, they only stared at one another. The queen's lips trembled, her voice caught in her throat. She wanted to speak, to admit she had been wrong. But pride is a heavy chain, and the words would not come. Instead, she whispered so softly he almost did not hear, "If you are not the betrayer, then who is?" The human gave no answer. He only pushed himself back to his feet, lifted his weapon once more, and stood ready. Because he knew the battle was not finished, and because he knew he would never let her face it alone. The palace was dying. Smoke filled the halls. Fires burned unchecked, and the cries of battle echoed through every corridor. The throne room was nothing but a graveyard of broken pillars and fallen soldiers. The queen leaned against the wall, her blood still dripping, her strength fading. The human stood nearer, one hand pressed against his wound, his other gripping his weapon, his eyes watching every shadow as if the darkness itself was alive. They both knew the truth. If they stayed here, they would die. The rebels were too many, the palace too corrupted. Every hallway could be a trap, every corner another blade waiting to strike. And yet, retreat was not in their nature. Both queen and human were creatures of battle, but even warriors must know when to step into the shadows to survive. The queen's voice was low, strained, but still commanding. There is a way beneath the palace, old tunnels, forgotten by most. They were built for kings and queens to flee when war came to their walls. The human nodded, his voice firm despite the blood in his throat. Then show me the way, my queen, and I'll see you live to walk out of them. Her pride bristled at the word my queen, as if it made her sound weak. But her heart burned at the truth inside it. This human, broken and bleeding, still called her his, not as a master, not as an enemy, but as someone he had chosen. She turned, her golden eyes glowing faintly in the dark, and led him into a shattered passage hidden behind the throne. The air grew colder as they descended. Stone walls pressed close, the sound of battle above fading into distant thunder. The tunnels smelled of earth and dust, old and forgotten. Their footsteps echoed softly, each sound swallowed by the dark. The queen held a faint light in her palm, her alien power glowing blue, casting shadows that twisted and shifted. The human walked close behind, his weapon ready, his eyes sharp. But the shadows were not empty. Something moved within them. The human felt it first, the prickling at the back of his neck, the sound of claws scraping against stone. The queen felt it too, her breath quickening, her hand tightening on her blade. These tunnels were not safe. Perhaps they never had been. Then the sound came, a low growl, deep and hungry. From the dark, eyes appeared, glowing yellow, watching them. The queen's heart clenched, her voice cold. The creatures of the deep, they live here. They feed on blood. The human raised his weapon, his voice steady. Then they'll find mine too bitter to swallow. The first creature leapt from the shadows, long claws reaching, teeth sharp as knives. The human swung his blade, cutting it down in a spray of black blood. But more came, crawling from cracks in the walls, from the ceiling, from the endless dark. Their screeches filled the tunnels, a chorus of hunger. The queen unleashed her power, blue flames bursting from her hand, searing creatures where they stood. The tunnel lit like lightning, shadows dancing like ghosts. Still, the swarm pressed in. The human fought like a cornered beast, his wounds forgotten, his rage the only strength he had left. Every strike was wild, brutal, breaking bone and spilling blood. Beside him, the queen fought with elegance, her blade flashing, her flames scorching. Together they stood, human and queen, back to back in the darkness. But the creatures were endless. The queen's strength began to fade, her blood loss slowing her movements. A claw slipped past her, defense slashing across her arm. She staggered, her knees trembling. The human saw, he roared, slamming his weapon through another beast and throwing himself in front of her. The creatures lunged, clawing and biting. But he did not move. His body became her shield once more, his pain nothing compared to her safety. The queen gasped, her heart torn. She hated him. She mistrusted him. But in this moment, she saw the truth again. He did not care if she called him unworthy. He did not care if she cursed his name. He would bleed for her, always. The tunnel shook as another wave of beasts charged. The queen closed her eyes, summoning the last of her strength. Her power exploded outward, blue fire flooding the tunnel, burning the creatures to ash. The walls cracked, stone falling as the ground trembled. Silence fell again, broken only by the human's ragged breathing. He fell to one knee, blood soaking his side. The queen rushed to him, her pride forgotten, her hands reaching to steady him. Her voice cracked, trembling with something she had never allowed herself to feel. "You fool," she whispered. "Why do you do this? Why do you give your life for me?" The human looked up, his face pale, his eyes burning still. "Because your enemies are. Mine too, and because I swore I would never let you fall." The queen's chest ached, her eyes stung. She wanted to deny it, to push him away, but the truth burned inside her. Perhaps she had been blind. Perhaps the betrayal she feared was never his. Perhaps the real traitors were above, plotting in her council chamber. Drinking wine while her blood stained the stones, she helped him to his feet, her hand trembling as it held his arm. The human leaned on her, but still held his weapon, still ready to fight. Together, limping and bleeding, they pushed deeper into the tunnels, the silence around them heavy, every step uncertain. But both of them knew the same truth now. The shadows had taken much. But the greatest danger still waited above. The throne was no longer hers, and to take it back, she would need the one she had once called unworthy. The throne room shook like the bones of a dying beast. Golden pillars cracked. Ancient carvings of alien victories crumbled to dust. The queen's blood, dark and glowing, tripped down the broken stairs. Her scream echoed a mixture of rage and fear. Kale stood at the bottom of the throne steps. His chest rose and fell with pain, but his eyes stayed sharp. He had survived battles that should have killed him. He had carried wounds that no other species could survive. Now he faced the alien queen, betrayed by her own guards, bleeding from wounds that should have ended her rule. "You are not worthy," she hissed again, clutching her side. But her voice trembled now. Hale stepped closer, each footstep echoing in the broken silence. "Maybe I'm not worthy. Maybe I'm just human. But tonight, it's not your throne anymore." Her guards hesitated, unsure. Some had already fallen to Kale's defiance. Others looked at their queen and saw weakness for the first time. The queen's eyes burned. She raised her clawed hand, summoning her energy blade. Blue fire burst to life, cutting the air with a sharp hum. But the blade flickered, unstable, just like her will. Kale picked up a fallen spear from the ground. It was heavy, made for alien soldiers, but he gripped it tight. His blood dripped on the stone floor, mixing with hers. The two locked eyes, human and alien, predator and prey. But no one knew which was which anymore. The queen lunged, fast like lightning. Her blade cut the air inches from Kale's throat. He ducked, rolled, and thrust the spear upward. Sparks exploded as her blade clashed against it. The sound was like thunder, filling the throne room. The guards watched in silence. For centuries, no one had dared to fight their queen. But now, a single human, betrayed and broken, was shaking the foundation of their empire. Kale's arms trembled as the queen pushed down on him with all her strength. His muscles screamed. His lungs burned. But his spirit refused to break. "You cannot win," she whispered in his ear, pressing harder. Kale's lips curled into a bloody smile. "That's what everyone says?" Until a human stands in front of them. With one last burst of strength, he twisted the spear, breaking the queen's balance. She stumbled back, her blade striking the throne itself. The great seat of power shattered, breaking into 1,000 glowing shards. The symbol of her rule was gone. The hall fell silent. Even the guards gasped. Not the queen's eyes widened in disbelief. For the first time in her long reign, she looked afraid. Kale dropped the spear. His hands shook, but he stood tall. "Your throne is broken, and soon your rule will be too." The queen snarled, blood running down her face. But she did not attack again. Her power was fading. The guards shifted uneasily, their eyes moving between the queen and the human. For the first time, they wondered who truly held strength. And deep in the shadows of the broken palace, something ancient stirred something even the queen had feared to awaken. The battle for survival was not over. The real war was just beginning. The halls of the alien palace shook as the battle reached its peak. Smoke and fire curled through broken walls. Shadows of alien warriors moved fast, their blades shining red in the dim light. The humans, though fewer, stood shoulder to shoulder. Their eyes burned with something the aliens had never seen before: unyielding. The human man, wounded and bleeding, leaned on a cracked column. His breath came heavy, but his hands did not tremble. Across the chamber, the alien queen stood tall, her crown tilted, her body marked with blood. Her voice echoed like thunder. "You are broken, human," she snarled. "One step more, and you will fall." But he did not fall. He stepped forward. One step, then another. The warriors around her froze. They had never seen such defiance. The queen's fury deepened. She raised her blade, glowing with strange power. "You are not worthy even to touch me," she shouted. Still, he walked closer, his eyes locked on hers, sharp and fearless. Every drop of blood that fell from his wounds marked the floor like a promise. Behind him, his allies whispered. Some begged him to stop, but others stayed silent, their eyes wide with awe. They knew something was different now. The queen struck with her weapon. The blade cut across his arm, leaving fire in its path. But the man did not cry out. Instead, he caught the edge with his bare hand, blood dripping freely. The queen's eyes widened shock, broke through her mask of power, that no one had ever dared touch her weapon. No one had ever stood against her strike. The chamber fell silent, save for the crackling of fire. "You bleed," the man said in a low voice, his words heavy like stone. "And so do I. That makes us equal." Her grip faltered. For the first time, fear flickered in the alien queen's gaze. Around them, her soldiers shifted uneasily, their loyalty shaken. But she quickly roared, shaking the air. "Do not be fooled," she bellowed to her warriors. "He is only flesh. End this human before he poisons your minds." The warriors raised their weapons, but none dared move first. The sight of their queen struggling against one wounded man planted doubt in their hearts. The queen pressed forward, her blade sparking with light. "You cannot win," she growled. "You are alone." The man, gasping for breath, smiled faintly. "No, I am human, and that is never alone." At that moment, the palace doors burst open. A wave of humans, battered but alive, stormed in. They had fought through fire and steel, and now they filled the chamber like a storm. The queen's roar shook the pillars. Rage and panic twisted her voice, crushed them all. But the humans did not falter. They shouted as one, a cry that tore through the walls, shaking the alien hearts. The man raised his bloodied hand, pointing straight at the queen. "This ends now." The air was thick with tension. The next moment would decide everything, the rise or fall of an empire. The battlefield was silent, but the silence was not peace. It was the heavy breath of fear, of awe, and of something new that even the oldest alien warriors could not explain. The alien commanders stood frozen, their army scattered and broken. They had thrown their strongest soldiers at the human, and one by one they had fallen, not because the human was faster, not because he had stronger weapons, but because he refused to give up, because he fought with something they had never seen before. The girl, the alien child they had tried to use as bait, was now standing beside him, her eyes wide, her small hands clenched around the human's arm. She could not understand why, but she felt safe, safer than she had ever felt in her life. And the aliens watching felt it too. Whispers ran through the ranks. Some spoke of the old legends, stories of humans told in warnings, stories that had always been dismissed as myths. They said humans carried within them a fire, not of technology, not of science, but of spirit, a fire that no blade, no chain, and no darkness could kill. The alien commander tried to shout, tried to command his soldiers, but his voice cracked. For the first time in centuries, he felt the weight of fear pressing down on his chest. The human stepped forward, bleeding, wounded, but standing tall. His voice carried across the ruins, strong and steady. "You thought Earth was weak," he said, each word cutting deeper than any weapon. You thought we were small, defenseless, easy prey, but now you see, when you touch what is ours, when you hurt those we protect, you do not face a planet. You face every human heart beating together. And we do not stop. The aliens trembled, for they understood now this was not just one man. This was the echo of an entire species. And if one could do this, what would happen if more came? The little girl looked up at him, her eyes filled with tears. Why? Why do you fight for me? She whispered, her voice shaking. The human knelt, his battered face softening. Because that's what we do, he said gently. We fight for those who cannot. We fight even when the universe tells us to fall. And we fight until there is nothing left. A hush fell over the crowd of enemies. And then slowly, one alien dropped his weapon, then another, and another, until the ground was littered with surrendered arms. The commander roared in anger. Drawing his blade, he charged at the human, but before he could strike, the human caught the blade with his bare hand, blood dripping, but his grip unshaken. He pulled the weapon away and snapped it in two as if it were nothing. The commander fell to his knees, the fire in his eyes gone. The truth undeniable. The stars above seemed to blaze brighter that night. As if the universe itself bore witness, the human stood at the center of the battlefield, broken yet unbowed, victorious not only in battle but in spirit. The child clung to him, the armies lowered their heads, and somewhere deep within their hearts, even the aliens who hated humans felt something strange. Respect. The story of that day spread faster than light. Across ships, across worlds, across empires, they called it many things. A miracle, a legend, a warning, but to humans it was simple. It was the day the galaxy remembered who they were. It was the day one human stood alone and forever changed the universe. And though he walked away from the battlefield, scarred and weary, the fire in his heart burned brighter than ever, because humans were not done. Not yet, not ever. The galaxy would learn again and again that humanity was not prey, not fragile, not weak. Humanity was the storm, the fire, the unbroken will, and that legacy, carried by one human on that battlefield, would live on forever.